Okay, just like I promised Snapchat, I'm going to be reading A Highly Sensitive Person. This is more for me just to get it out of the system. I feel like I talk about this book so much to so many people that I'm just gonna refer them back to my Facebook page or whatnot if they ask. Or, I will tell them what it is about if they ask. But I feel like I talk about it so much that I just need to read about it. I'm just going to read a little bit about the preface before I read chapter 1. I've taken the self-test in on my Snapchat. I scored 19 and above. I scored 19. Let me see. I will start in the preface. I'll start in the preface. Crybaby. Scaredy cat. Don't be a spoil sport. Echoes from the past. And how about this well meaning warning? You're just too sensitive for your own good. If you were like me, you heard a lot of that, and it made you feel there must be something very different about you. I was convinced that I had a fatal flaw that I had to hide and that doomed me to the second rate life. I thought there was something wrong with me. In fact, there was something very right with you and me. If you answer true to 12 or more of the questions on the self test at the beginning of this book, or if the detailed description in chapter 1 seems to fit you, really the best test, then you are a very special type of human being, a highly sensitive person, which hereafter we'll call an HSP. And this book is just for you. Having a sensitive nervous system is normal, a basically neutral trait. You probably inherited it. It occurs in about 15 to 20% of the population. It means you are aware of subtleties in your surroundings, a great advantage in many situations. It also means that you are more easily overwhelmed when you have been out in a highly stimulating environment for too long. Boomer, oh my gosh. Bombarded by sights and sounds until you are exhausted in a nervous system sort of way. Thus, being sensitive has both advantages and disadvantages. In our culture, however, possessing this trait is not considered ideal, and that fact probably has had a major impact on you. Well meaning parents and teachers probably try to help you overcome it as if it were a defect. Other children were not always as nice about it. As an adult, it has probably been harder to find the right career and relationships, and generally to feel self worth and self confidence. What this book offers you. This book provides basic, detailed information you need about your trait, data that exists nowhere else. It is the product of 5 years of research, in depth interviews, clinical experiences, courses, and individual consultations with hundreds of HSPs and careful reading between the lines of what psychology has already learned about the trait but does not realize it knows. In the first 3 chapters, you will learn all the basic facts about your trait and how to handle overstimulation and overarousal of your nervous system. Next, this book considers the impact of your sensitivity on personal history, career, relationships, and inner life. It focuses on the advantages you may not have thought of, plus, it gives advice about typical problems about some HSPs face, such as shyness or difficulty finding the right sort of work. It is quite a journey we'll take. Most of the HSPs I've helped with the information that is in this book have told me that it has dramatically changed their lives. And they've told me to tell you that. A word to the sensitive, but less so. First, if you have picked up this book because you're the parent, spouse, or friend of a HSP, then you're especially welcome here. Your relationship with your HSP will be greatly improved. Second, a telephone survey of 300 randomly selected individuals of all ages found that while 20% were extremely or quite sensitive, another 22% were moderately sensitive. Those of you who fall into this moderately sensitive category will also benefit from this book. By the way, 42% said that they were not sensitive at all, which suggests why the highly sensitive can feel so completely out of step with a large part of the world. And naturally, it's that segment of the population that's always turning up the radio or honking their horns. Further, it is safe to say that everyone can become highly sensitive at times. For example, after a month alone in a mountain cabin, and everyone becomes more sensitive as they age. Indeed, most people, whether they admit it or not, probably have a highly sensitive facet that comes to the fore in certain situations. Some things to say to non-HSPs. Sometimes non-HSPs feel excluded and hurt by the idea that we are different from them and maybe sound like we think we are somehow better. They say, "Do you mean I'm not sensitive?" One problem is that sensitive also means being understanding and aware. Both HSPs and non HSPs can have these qualities, which are optimized when we are feeling good and alert to the subtle. When we when very calm, HSPs may even enjoy the advantage of picking up more delicate nuances. When over aroused, however, a frequent state for HSPs, we are anything but understanding or sensitive. Instead, we are overwhelmed, frazzled, and need to be alone. By contrast, your non HSP friends are actually more understanding of others in highly chaotic situations. I thought long and hard about what to call this trait. I knew I didn't want to repeat the same mistake of confusing it with introversion, shyness, and inhibitedness, and a host of other misnomers laid on us by other psychologists. None of them captures the neutral, much less the positive aspects of the trait. Sensitivity does express the neutral fact of greater receptive to stimulation, so it seemed to be time to make for the bias against HSPs by using a term that might be taken in our favor. On the other hand, being highly sensitive is anything but positive to some. While sitting in my quiet house writing this, at a time when no one is talking about the trait, I'll go on record. This book would generate more than its share of hurtful jokes and comments about HSPs. There's tremendous collective psychological energy around the idea of being sensitive, almost as much as around gender issues, with which sensitivity is often confused. There are as many male as female babies born sensitive, but men are not supposed to possess the trait, and women are. Both genders pay a high price for that confusion. So just be prepared for that energy. Protect both your sensitivity and your newly bunding understanding of it by not talking about it at all when that seems most prudent. Mostly enjoy knowing that there are also many like minded people out there. We have not been in touch before, but we are now, and both we and our society will be the better for it. In chapters 1, 6, and 10, I will comment at some length on the HSP's important social function. What you need. I have found that HSPs benefit from a fourfold approach, which the chapters in this book will follow. 1. Self knowledge. You have to understand what it means to be an HSP thoroughly, and how it fits with your other traits and how your society's negative attitude has affected you. Then you need to know your sensitive body very well. No more ignoring your body because it seems too uncooperative or weak. 2. Reframing. You must actively reframe much of your past in the light of knowing you came into the world highly sensitive. So many of your failures were inevitable because neither you nor your parents and teachers, friends, and colleagues understood you. Reframing how you experienced your past can lead to solid self esteem, and self esteem is especially important for HSPs, for it decreases our over arousal in new and therefore highly stimulating situations. Reframing is not automatic, however. That is why I include activities at the end of each chapter that often involve it. 3. Healing. If you have not yet done so, you must begin to heal the deeper wounds. You were very sensitive as a child. Family and school problems, childhood illnesses, and the like all affected you more than others. Furthermore, you were different from other kids and almost surely suffered for that. HSPs, especially sensing the intense feelings that must arise, may hold back from the inner work necessary to heal the wounds from the past. Caution and slowness are justified, but you will cheat yourself if you delay. 4. Help with feeling okay when out in the world and learning when to be less out. You can be, should be, and need to be involved in the world. It truly needs you, but you have to be skilled at avoiding overdoing or underdoing it. This book, free of the confusing messages from a less sensitive culture, is about discovering that way. I will also teach you about your traits' effect on your close relationships, and I will discuss psychotherapy and HSPs, which HSPs should be in therapy and why, what kind, with whom, and especially how therapy differs for HSPs. Then I'll consider HSPs in medical care, including plenty of information on medicines like Prozac, often taken by HSPs. At the end of this book, we will savor a rich inner life. Okay, I have more time now. I'm on my lunch break, so I'll finish the preface. Okay, about myself, Elaine Aaron. I am a research psychologist, university professor, psychotherapist, and published novelist. What matters most, however, is that I am an HSP like you. I am definitely not writing from on high, aiming down to help you, poor soul, overcome your syndrome. I know personally about our trait, its assets, and its challenges. As a child, at home, I hid from the chaos in my family. At school, I avoided sports, games, and kids in general. What a mixture of relief and humiliation when my strategy succeeded and I totally ignored. And I was totally ignored. In junior high school, an extrovert took me under her wing. In high school, that relationship continued. Plus, I studied most of the time. In college, my life became far more difficult. After many stops and starts, including a 4-year marriage undertaken too young, I finally graduated Phi Beta Kappa from the University of California at Berkeley. But I spent my share of time crying in restrooms, thinking I was going crazy. My research has found that retreating like this, often to cry, is typical of HSPs. In my first try at graduate school, I was provided with an office, to which I also retreated and cried, trying to regain some calm. Because of such reactions, I stopped my studies with master's degree, even though I was highly encouraged to continue for a doctorate. It took 25 years for me to gain the information about my trait that made it possible to understand my reactions and so complete that doctorate. When I was 23, I met my current husband and started settling down into a very protective life of writing and rearing a son. I was simultaneously delighted and ashamed of not being out there. I was vaguely aware of my lost opportunities to learn, to enjoy more public recognition of my abilities, to be more connected with all kinds of people. But from bitter experience, I thought I had no choice. Some arousing events, however, cannot be avoided. I had to undergo a medical procedure from which I assumed I would recover in a few weeks. Instead, oh, you can see me. Oh, but I can't see you. Oh, sorry. Instead, for months, my body seemed to resound with physical and emotional reactions. I was being forced to face once again that mysterious, fatal flaw of mine that made me so different. So I tried some psychotherapy and got lucky. After listening to me for a few sessions, my therapist said, "But of course you are upset. You are a very highly sensitive person." What is this? I thought. Some excuse? She said she had never thought much of it, but from her experience, it seemed that there were real differences in people's tolerance for stimulation and also their openness to the deeper significance of an experience, good and bad. To her, such sensitivity was hardly a sign of mental flaw or disorder. At least she hoped not, for she was highly sensitive herself. I recall her grin, as are most of the people who strike me as really worth knowing. I spent several years in therapy, none of it wasted, working through various issues from my childhood, but the central theme became the impact of this trait. There it was my sense of being flawed. There was the willingness of others to protect me in return for enjoying my imagination, empathy, creativity, and insight, which I myself hardly appreciated. And there was my resulting isolation from the world. But as I gained insight, I was able to re enter the world. I take great pleasure now in being part of things. I take great pleasure in being part of things. A professional and sharing the special gifts of my sensitivity. The research behind this book. As knowledge about my trait changed my life, I decided to read about more of it. But there was almost nothing available. I thought the closest topic might be introversion. The psychiatrist Carl Jung wrote very wisely on the subject, calling it a tendency to turn inward. The work of Jung himself at HSP has been a major help to me, but the more scientific work on introversion was focused on introverts not being sociable, and it was that idea which made me wonder if introversion and sensitivity were being wrongly equated. With so little information to go on, I decided to put a notice in a newsletter that went to the staff at the university where I was teaching at the time. I asked to interview anyone who felt they were highly sensitive to stimulation, introverted, or quick to react emotionally. Soon I had more volunteers than I needed. Next, the local paper did a story on the research. Even though there was nothing said in the article about how to reach me, over 100 people phoned and wrote me, thanking me, wanting help, or just wanting to say, me too. 2 years later, people were still contacting me. HSPs sometimes think things over for a while before making their move. Based on the interviews, 40 for 2 to 3 hours each, I designed a questionnaire that I have distributed to thousands all over North America. And I directed a random dialing telephone survey of 300 people as well. The point that matters for you is that everything in this book is based on solid research, my own of that or that of others. Or I'm speaking from my repeated observation of HSPs from my courses, conversations, individual consultations, and psychotherapy with them. These opportunities to explore the personal lives of HSPs have numbered in thousands. Even so, I will say probably and maybe more than you are used to in books for the general reader, but I think HSPs appreciate that. Deciding to do all of this research, writing, and teaching has made me a kind of a pioneer, but that too is part of being an HSP. We are often the first ones to see what needs to be done. As our confidence in our virtues grows, perhaps more and more of us will speak up in our sensitive way. Instructions to the reader. 1. Again, I address the reader as an HSP, but this book is written equally for someone seeking to understand HSPs, whether as a friend, relative, advisor, employer, educator, or health professional. 2. This book involves seeing yourself as having a trait common to many. That is, it labels you. The advantages are that you can feel normal and benefit from the experience and research of others. But any label misses your uniqueness. HSPs are each utterly different, even with their common trait. Please remember yourself of that as you proceed. 3. While you are reading this book, you will probably see everything in your life in light of being highly sensitive. That is to be expected. In fact, it is exactly the idea. Total immersion helps with learning any new language, including a new way of talking about yourself. If others feel a little concerned, left out, or annoyed, ask for their patience. There will come a day when the concept will settle in and you'll be talking about it less. 4. This book includes some activities which I have found useful for HSPs, but I am not going to say that you must do them if you want to gain anything from this book. Trust your HSP intuition and do what feels right. 5. Any of the activities could bring up strong feelings. If that happens, I do urge you to seek professional help. If you are now in therapy, this book should fit well with your work there. The ideas here might even shorten the time you will need therapy as you envision a new ideal self. Not the cultural's idea, but your own, someone you can be and maybe already are. But remember that this book does not substitute for a good therapist when things get intense or confusing. This is an exciting moment for me as I imagine you turning the pages and entering into this new world of mine, of yours, of ours. After thinking for so long that you might be the only one, it is nice to have company, isn't it? And then she does the survey. I answered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I answered 19. 19 was my number one, okay? or was my scoring. Uh, Later tonight I'll put the facts about being highly sensitive. Wait, she didn't go on. I should talk about it later. Okay.